Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit stories about awful coworkers. In today's Ripestories video, imagine a workplace so toxic that a coworker tries to destroy your life over a haircut. She thought she was playing the ultimate corporate chess game to get me fired, but she had no idea I was about to pull a reverse card that changed everything. Let's dive right into the video. This story is titled, "Coworker Tried to Get Me Fired for Shaving My Head, so I pulled a reverse Uno card on her." So I live and work in China, employed at a very traditional high-pressure corporate company in a major city. This place is notorious for its strict policies, especially regarding employee appearance. The employee handbook has an entire section dedicated exclusively to female grooming and attire, and according to these rules, women must wear formal business suits, maintain neat makeup, and keep their hair at a conventional length. Specifically, the guidelines state that female employees must have hair that is at least shoulder length or styled in a traditional feminine bob. Anything deemed eccentric, unnatural, or masculine is strictly forbidden and can be grounds for disciplinary action or even termination for failing to represent the company's values. In our department, there was a coworker named Lynn. Lynn was the kind of person who made it her life's mission to police everyone else. She had been with the company a bit longer than me and viewed herself as the unofficial enforcer of corporate standards. She was always watching what people wore, how they spoke, and how they styled themselves. If someone wore a skirt that she deemed slightly too short, or if a colleague used a hair clip that was a bit too colorful, Lynn would immediately report them to our department head or HR. She was trying desperately to climb the corporate ladder and thought that tearing others down was the best way to show her loyalty to the management. Most of us just tried to keep our distance and avoid her radar, but it was impossible to escape her constant monitoring. Things changed completely for me when I started feeling constantly exhausted. I initially chalked it up to the intense overtime we were working, but then I started experiencing severe physical symptoms too. I finally decided to go to the hospital during a weekend to get a full medical screening, and after a long series of tests, scans, and agonizing waiting rooms, the doctor called me into his office. He sat me down and told me that they found cancerous cells that required immediate aggressive intervention. I was diagnosed with a serious form of cancer, and the treatment plan included several rounds of heavy chemotherapy, and hearing that news completely shattered my world. I spent days crying in my apartment trying to process the reality of my health. My doctor explained that within a few weeks of starting chemotherapy, my hair would begin to fall out in large clumps. He suggested that many patients find it less emotionally traumatic to handle the hair loss on their own terms rather than waking up to find their hair all over their pillows. After thinking it over, I decided to take control of at least one thing in my life. I went to a local hair salon and asked him to shave my head completely. Watching my long hair fall to the floor was incredibly difficult, but when it was done, I felt a strange sense of readiness. I was prepared to fight this illness, however, I still needed to keep working to maintain my income and medical insurance, which meant I had to face my colleagues and the strict company policies with my new look. The next morning I walked into the office wearing a simple dark beanie to cover my shaved head. I knew the rules about hats indoors were vague, but I hoped people would understand or simply ignore it. I sat at my desk and tried to focus entirely on my spreadsheets, ignoring the side eyes from a few people around me. It didn't take long for Lynn to notice, and within an hour of the workday starting, she walked over to my desk with a stack of files, purposely dropping them next to my keyboard. She stared directly at my head with an expression of intense disapproval. "Why are you wearing a hat inside the office? You know that's completely against our professional dress code. It looks sloppy," Lynn said, her voice loud enough for the neighboring desks to hear. I looked up at her, trying to keep my composure. I was feeling incredibly weak from my first treatment session and didn't have the energy for her games. "I have a personal medical reason for wearing it today, Lynn. It doesn't affect my work performance, so please let me focus on my tasks," I replied quietly. Lynn scoffed loudly, crossing her arms. "Medical reason? We all have headaches or bad hair days, but we still follow the rules. This company represents high-class clients. If a manager walks through this floor and sees you looking like you're going to a gym, it reflects poorly on our entire department. Take it off." Well, I refused to take it off, and she eventually walked away, muttering to herself about disrespect and unprofessionalism. The office environment became incredibly tense. The central heating in our building was running very high that week, and by the middle of the afternoon I was sweating and feeling completely suffocated by the beanie. My scalp was irritated, and the discomfort was making it impossible to concentrate. Realizing that I couldn't survive the whole day hiding under the hat, I took a deep breath, took off the beanie, and placed it in my bag. The reaction from the office was immediate. Several coworkers stared at me with wide eyes, completely shocked to see that my head was entirely shaved. I kept my eyes fixed on my computer, my heart pounding against my ribs. I just wanted to do my job and go home, and it only took a few minutes for Lynn to spot my shaved head. She practically marched over to my desk, her face twisted in absolute disgust. She didn't ask if I was okay, and she didn't show even an ounce of human empathy. Instead, she pointed directly at my bald head. "What on earth did you do to yourself? Are you insane?" Lynn yelled, not caring that the entire floor was listening to her outburst. I looked up feeling a mixture of intense vulnerability and growing anger. "I had to shave my head, Lynn. As I told you before, it's for a medical reason," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but Lynn laughed at me, a harsh and mocking sound that echoed in the quiet office. "A medical reason, huh? You look like a man. This is a gross violation of the company appearance guidelines for female staff. The handbook explicitly states that women must maintain feminine, professional hairstyles. Having a completely shaved head is aggressive, masculine, and totally inappropriate for our corporate culture. You are bringing down the image of our team." A few coworkers nearby looked deeply uncomfortable with how she was talking to me, but nobody stood up to her because everyone was terrified of her tendency to report people. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "My appearance has nothing to do with my ability to process those accounts. I'm just doing my job. Please leave me alone." But Lynn did not leave it alone. For the next 2 days, she made it her personal mission to ensure everyone knew how unacceptable my haircut was. Every time I went to the printer, she would make audible comments to whoever was standing near her, saying things like, "I didn't know we started hiring soldiers for data entry," or "Some people have absolutely no respect for corporate standards." She even started avoiding me in the hallways, making dramatic gestures of moving out of the way, as if my shaved head was somehow contagious. I discovered from a supportive colleague in our department that Lynn was actively trying to rally people against me. She had spent her lunch breaks going around to different desks telling people that my look was a deliberate act of rebellion against management and that allowing me to stay would ruin the company's reputation with our traditional clients. She was building a case to get me removed, seeing this as a golden opportunity to eliminate a competent peer and position herself for the upcoming team leader promotion. On the third day, after I shaved my head, I received an urgent notification on my computer. It was a formal summons to the Human Resources Department. My heart sank a bit. I knew exactly who was behind this. I gathered my personal notebook and walked down the long, quiet hallway to the HR office. When I stepped inside, I saw the HR manager sitting behind a large desk, and to my absolute lack of surprise, Lynn was already sitting in one of the chairs opposite him, holding a folder tightly in her hands. She had a look of triumphant satisfaction on her face, completely confident that she was about to watch me get fired. The HR manager looked at me with a serious, rigid expression. He gestured for me to take a seat next to Lynn. "Thank you for coming down." The HR manager began adjusting his glasses. "Lynn has filed a formal and highly detailed complaint regarding your appearance. She has noted that your current hairstyle is a direct violation of Section 4 of the Employee Grooming Policy, which outlines the required presentation for female staff. Lynn argues that your shaved head is creating a disruptive environment and fails to meet our standards for client-facing professionalism." Lynn immediately chimed in, eager to twist the knife. "Yes, sir, I felt it was my duty to bring this up. We have strict rules for a reason. If we let one female employee walk around with a completely masculine shaved head, it sets a terrible precedent. It looks like an act of defiance and it makes our company look highly unprofessional. Clients come to this floor every day. How can we explain this? It's completely inappropriate and she refuses to wear a wig or cover it up properly." I sat there quietly, listening to her spewing venom. I looked at the HR manager, who seemed to be waiting for my defense, and he looked like he was ready to issue a formal termination notice or a severe penalty based on the handbook rules. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" the HR manager asked me. The policy is indeed very clear about the grooming expectations for female employees. I opened my notebook and pulled out an official document from the hospital. It was a formal medical certificate signed by the head oncologist, complete with the official red hospital stamps that carry immense legal weight in China. It clearly detailed my cancer diagnosis, my patient identification information, and the aggressive chemotherapy schedule that made shaving my head a medical necessity. I handed the paper directly to the HR manager. "I shaved my head because I have cancer and my hair is falling out due to chemotherapy," I said clearly, ensuring that my voice carried across the room. Here's my official medical documentation, including the hospital validation and my doctor's statement. I'm fighting a life-threatening illness here, and I'm still coming to work every single day to fulfill my contract. The HR manager's face went completely pale. His rigid corporate demeanor collapsed instantly as he read the document. In China, corporate laws and public perception surrounding the mistreatment of seriously ill employees, especially cancer patients, are incredibly severe. Firing an employee who is undergoing cancer treatment over an appearance policy would not only violate labor laws but would create a massive public relations nightmare that could destroy the company's reputation overnight. Lynn, however, didn't seem to realize the gravity of what she had done. She leaned forward, trying to look at the paper. A medical condition shouldn't excuse a total lack of professionalism. She could wear a realistic wig or stay at home on unpaid leave instead of making our department look bad, Lynn protested, completely blind to the trap she had just walked into. The HR manager turned to Lynn, his expression changing from corporate coldness to pure anger. Lynn, be quiet right now. The HR manager snapped, his voice sharp. This was the moment I turned the situation around. I didn't just want to defend myself, I wanted to ensure that Lynn could never harass me or anyone else ever again. I reached back into my notebook, pulled out a second set of documents. These were printed copies of an extensive log I'd been keeping over the past few days, along with written statements from 4 other coworkers in our department. Over the last 48 hours, while Lynn was busy trying to get me fired, I had quietly talked to several colleagues who were completely disgusted by her behavior. They were tired of her constant bullying and snooping, and when they found out she was targeting me while I was dealing with a severe health crisis, they had seen enough. They gladly signed statements detailing the exact phrases Lynn had used, her attempts to ostracize me, and her explicit comments calling my medical hair loss masculine and defiant. I handed these statements to the HR manager. Lynn did not just file a policy complaint, I stated firmly. She is engaged in a systematic campaign of workplace harassment and bullying against me during a severe medical crisis. As these signed statements from my colleagues confirm, she has publicly humiliated me, mocked my medical condition, and tried to create a hostile environment in our department. She claimed my appearance was a violation of company values, but her behavior is a direct violation of the company's core ethics policy regarding employee respect and workplace safety. The HR manager took the statements and read through them. His eyes darted from the pages to Lynn, who was suddenly looking incredibly nervous. She had not expected me to have backup, and she certainly hadn't expected her own department peers to turn on her. "This is absurd. They are lying. I was just defending the handbook," Lynn stammered, her voice rising in panic. "I'm a loyal employee. I was just doing what the rules say." The HR manager stood up from his desk, holding both my medical files and the harassment statements. The handbook is designed to maintain order, not to be used as a weapon to abuse a colleague undergoing cancer treatment, the HR manager said sternly. "Lynn, your behavior is completely unacceptable, and this goes far beyond a simple misunderstanding. You have actively created a toxic environment and harassed an employee with a validated medical necessity." He turned to me, saying, his tone softening significantly, "Please return to your desk and focus on your work. The company will fully accommodate your medical needs, and you don't need to worry about the grooming policy during your treatment. We will handle this matter immediately." I thanked him, picked up my notebook, and walked out the office. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear the HR manager starting to yell at Lynn, demanding a full explanation of her cruel behavior. I went back to my desk and continued working my assignments, feeling an immense weight lifted off my shoulders. About an hour passed before Lynn finally returned to the office floor. She looked completely defeated, her face red and her eyes staring at the floor. She didn't look at me, and she didn't say a single word to anyone. She went straight to her desk, grabbed her personal bag, and began packing up her things into a cardboard box. The HR manager walked onto the floor a few minutes later, standing near the exit to ensure she left the premises without causing a scene. It turned out that the company decided to terminate her employment on the spot for gross misconduct, breach of the Employee Ethics Code, and creating a severe liability for the firm by harassing a sick employee. After she was gone, my manager came over to my desk along with several of my coworkers. They offered their full support, apologizing for not speaking up sooner against Lynn's bullying. The company also formally arranged for me to have a flexible schedule now, so I could attend my chemotherapy sessions without using up all my leave, and they ensured my medical coverage remained completely intact. And yeah, Ripestars, honestly, in my opinion, the HR manager's 180 the second that he saw that medical certificate tells you already everything about what actually motivated him. He did not suddenly develop empathy for OP, he simply saw a liability, and in China, the optics of terminating or disciplining an employee actively undergoing cancer treatment over a dress code would be catastrophic legally and publicly. At least if it came out, and Lin essentially handed the company a scenario where they could either fire a cancer patient over her hair or fire the person who tried to make them do that. The HR manager made a business decision here, not essentially a moral one, sadly, which is fine, but the outcome was right. Let's not pretend though that corporate suddenly grew a heart or something. And a user in the comments said, "I love how the other coworkers immediately turned on Lin the second they were asked. It shows that everyone already hated her and were just waiting for a safe opportunity to strike. She thought she was the unofficial enforcer, but in reality she was just the office parasite everyone tolerated out of fear. The moment she targeted someone who actually had the ultimate defense, the floodgates opened. This was beautiful." Another Reddit comment said, "The wildest part to me is here, how many workplaces have policies that are really just one busybody's dream weapon. There's always someone like Lin who memorizes the handbook not because they care about professionalism, but instead because they want a socially acceptable way to bully people." And yeah guys, indeed, I would say F Lin and anyone that acts like her. If you've ever had such an awful coworker or boss before in your life, please let us know about your story in the comments, I would love to read it. Revenge is a dish served very cold. Poster /pro revenge. So in my young 20s, I moved to a new city to try and start my career and life. Money was very tight, but I was confident I would get things up and running. In my job search, I came across a promising opportunity at a small firm, let's just call it the firm. Instead of offering me the job, the owner said he would like me to come in for 2 days and work. If it was a fit, they would hire me, and if not, they would pay for the 2 days. Money was tight at the time, so I figured taking the bus to and from the job was a luxury I couldn't afford, and I walked an hour each way to get there. Money was very tight. I did good work both the days and worked very hard, but it was not a fit. The owner then tells me, "I know we said we would pay you, but it's just too complicated to set you up for just 2 days, so you will have to be happy that you got the experience with us." The way he acted really rubbed me the wrong way. I was mad as I really needed the money, but as I was trying to find a job and I figured it was not in my best interest to make waves as word may get around that I was difficult, I did however decide that someday, someway, I would get my revenge on the owner. I did find a good job that led to a great career, but I always kept tabs on this owner, looking for the time and place to get some revenge and even a few times considered some more juvenile methods. Just short of 20 years passed, and now I was very senior in my chosen professional career, but instead of working for a small firm, I was a leader in a very large national company that hired firms. As it turns out, we had a large contract coming up that I was the lead executive on the procurement team in the area the firm operated in, and things had changed a bit over the years, but bidding on these contracts was at the firm's expense at the time, back in the early 2000s. However, to safeguard them from wasting too much money, the bidding would be in stages. And well, sure enough, the owner and his firm put in an exploratory bid. They were not perfect for the job, but they could actually do it, so I assisted them in moving to the next stage, and the next stage, and then the final stage. And the easiest thing I could have done was shut them down right away and get a bit of revenge, but they were qualified, so I didn't do that. There was some risk to letting them go through to the end though I was the lead. It was still a team decision, and to be honest, if they had the best proposal despite my thirst for revenge, I would vote for them. The proposals and presentation came in, and luckily the other firm was a bit better and we went with them. Normally, the executive lead did not deliver the bad news in the bidding process, but I volunteered to take on the call, and that was my little dose of revenge. It was fun to call the owner, who had no idea we met 20 years ago, and tell him, "We were impressed with your proposal, but it's just not the right fit. I know you must be disappointed to not get the contract, but at least you got great exposure to our process." I know I should have used his exact own words from 20 years ago, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The firm must have done about 200 hours of work on their proposal, so I figured that was payback for my 16 hours with 20 years of interest. And the next one is another amazing malicious compliance story. This one is titled, "You want me to break code? Okay then." So I work as an integrator working on smartphones and such. We don't really have any government codes other than being so far from gas lines. However, my boss wanted me to break this very code when wiring for a house to cheapen the expenses for less wire. Otherwise, we would have had to have pulled wire from one side of the house to the other, then into the basement, and rather than just pulling straight down and across. Basically, we would cut material costs down by about 65%. However, I knew it was wrong. I told him code, but he said it would be fine. And well, as it turns out, I did exactly what he told me to do, but the owner of our company was not pleased. The house failed inspection and we were the main cause, and I got blamed for it. Little did my boss know that I recorded all notes he gave me and timestamped them in our official documents, and pictures were included with the notes. Cover your rear, folks. Anyway, my boss got chewed out and I got to save my job. Also, a little malicious compliance turns into a load of satisfaction. Update: wow, I didn't expect to get so many upvotes, but yeah, I'm in the US, but I run low voltage wires. The space I could run the wires was about 10 inches in diameter, so enough to get a gas line and wiggle room. Sadly, it was going through a concrete wall, and concrete bits don't go big enough to fit all the wire we had, and you cannot drill through a load-bearing wall. So all I could do was go around it on the other side of the house, but when he wanted me to run it through the hole with the gas line. Also, code in the US states that anything with electrical current cannot be run next to a gas line within 2 feet or so. I try to just avoid it at all costs as not to have that code come into play. As for my boss though, he was a co-owner of the company I worked for, but he went through a divorce a number of years ago. Therefore, his business partners convinced him to sell his share to them, but he gets permanent job security. This was to avoid the ex-wife, crazy, from getting any say or control of the small business. Look, my boss has effed up so many times on so much, and I've only worked there for a year, and if I were to have screwed up on half the stuff he has, I would have been fired a long time ago. The next one is a petty revenge story, which is titled, "Saying Yes to Roofing Telemarketers." So, in late April, my area, Midwestern USA, was pummeled by a major hailstorm. My neighborhood was hit especially badly. Everyone is getting a new roof, siding damaged, skylights shattered, cars were totaled, AC units are all beat up, and anything outside like patio furniture was super trashed. And with this came the rush of storm-chasing roofing companies, lots of out-of-town sketchy companies. They've been calling and even door-knocking non-stop for like 2 months, so I hired a reputable local guy a week after the storm. He's understandably booked out and has not replaced my roof yet. He also doesn't do yard signs like many of the companies do, so they've kept the pressure on me. It doesn't even matter how many times I've said no or hung up on them. They keep calling, offering free roof inspections. My number is on the do not call list, but they don't care. No one does anymore. 2 weeks ago I started actually talking to them, and I asked the company name, tell them I've already hired someone and hang up, and then I log the company name in a quick Excel sheet. If a company called 3 times, I started saying yes, set up a time for an inspection. 3 different companies were on my roof today. All of them came down wanting to sign a contract right away, and I explained that I'd already hired someone, but thanks for the second opinion. Waste my time, I will waste yours. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.